Hi, it's Siobhán, one of the reporters up at Manx Radio, back with you for another episode of our newscast. I recently went for another look behind the scenes with the Department of Infrastructure, and this time it was a visit to Ellerslie Depot, the home of Fleet Services.
I'm Andy Barker and I'm the Head of Fleet Services for Isle of Man Government. So Fleet Services manages the procurement, maintenance, administration, compliance and disposal of all the government fleet vehicles and plant assets.
So fleet vehicles, what does that encompass? What are we talking about there?
So we have round about 2,000 assets, predominantly made up of vehicles which range from cars and vans through to the municipal highways fleet, and it also includes the police, the ambulance, the fire appliances.
How do you keep track of any that maybe are heading towards the end of the life, that might need an upgrade?
Yeah, so we have a number of fleet management systems. So one of the systems that we use is something called FleetWave. And that's a Chevin-based product, and it's basically an inventory. So it keeps track of every vehicle that we've got, every plant asset that we've got. It's got all the registration details in it. It's got all the make, model. It keeps track of all the mileage for us based on when we're using our fuel management system. So all that data's imported into it, and all the maintenance records are kept in there as well. So any repair or service or inspection that we have to do, everything's recorded and uploaded into that system for us to track.
And obviously you don't kind of just drop these vehicles off at a regular garage, so you've got mechanics here on site. What goes into their job?
Yeah, so we have 26 positions, which are 6 supervisors and then 20 senior HGV technicians. We also run a comprehensive apprenticeship scheme as well. And within that, we service and maintain the majority of the fleet ourselves. A lot of the cars and vans just have a general annual service. So some of that we have an external contract with 3 providers on the island. So your standard cars, your standard vans generally go to external providers. Whereas the more bespoke assets that we look after, like we have a dedicated workshop for the police vehicles, we have a dedicated workshop for the fire appliances, we have a dedicated workshop down at the airport for the majority of their assets, and here at Ellerslie we generally maintain all the HGV fleet, so anything that requires compliance related maintenance in terms of the government's HGV operating licence, everything's maintained here that's on that licence.
So not that long ago we saw new fire engines, for example, going down to the airport. When do you make that decision of these need an upgrade, and is it here on this site where you make that decision and work out what equipment's going to be bought instead?
Yeah, predominantly. There's obviously interactions with the end user. So in terms of the airport assets, which were originally Carmichael's and an Ituri crash tender, the decision was taken between us and the airport that those vehicles needed replacing, and that generally comes about through the ability to acquire parts for those vehicles. So the Ituri in particular was kind of a bespoke vehicle that was built out in Spain, and trying to source parts for that was proving difficult, even your standard service items. So when it becomes an issue of being able to keep the vehicles live as live assets, that's generally when we start looking at whether we can replace them or alter them for something else.
And another major operation that people would have heard of out of here was gritters in the winter. But what goes into mobilising that fleet and working out where they need to go and all that sort of thing?
Well, that's predominantly run out of Ellerslie here, and Highways obviously run that operation. In terms of the actual assets themselves, obviously like we do with the airport for the crash tenders, we do a similar exercise with bespoke vehicles for Highways. So in terms of the gritters, we obviously sit down and flesh out a specification of what's needed to deliver that operation and how many assets they need to deliver it. And then we generally do all the maintenance here for that, and we calibrate everything before they go into a winter maintenance programme.
Do you think that the scale of the operation here is something that the general public just has no concept of how much actually goes on?
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, we're not exactly public facing. A lot of people will see an asset like a fire appliance and think that it's solely down to the fire service to be responsible for that. But the Department of Infrastructure is responsible for all government vehicles, and like I say, we not only maintain it, we do all the procurement exercise, so all the tender goes in from our team from a procurement and contracts point of view, and then from a disposal point of view we do all that as well. And then, like I say, the administration and compliance, so anything that goes into the government O licence, anything that require, just down to your basic tax discs and things like that, renewals, all that's done by Fleet Services. So we have round about, including the apprenticeship programme that we've got, we have round about 65 employees that goes into managing the government's fleet.
What goes into training then for these mechanics to come in? Because obviously, presumably some of it's quite specialised, especially with the fire equipment and things like that.
Yeah, it is. We engage with UCM, so they run the course for us, and it's a 4-year programme. So generally we can take people that have got no experience whatsoever. So people come in at different levels. Generally they'll go through the 4-year apprenticeship. At the end of the 3rd year they become level 2 qualified, but part of the specification we look for in a job description is level 3, so they gain that at the end of their year 4. It's always been fairly successful with us. In fact, we've got 2 apprentices that are due to finish the year 4 this academic year, and we've kept vacancies back. We've not recruited into vacancies so that they can successfully transition into the team permanently. Other part of our responsibility is the government's fuelling network and the EV charging infrastructure. So we have around about 6 sites across the island where we've got dedicated fuel tanks, which is predominantly white diesel. Anything that runs on petrol, which is few and far between, it's mainly our handheld equipment. We have fuel cards that are issued out to the service areas, and they can go to certain garages on the island and withdraw petrol. But generally we've got around about 100,000 litres of diesel across the island that are accessible for various government operations. In the EV charging infrastructure, we're just expanding on that at the minute, so we've just recently had some new charging points installed at DHA at Tremode, and we've just had some more installed up at the prison, and the prison's fleet, cars and vans, are currently transitioning over from diesel to electric.
I was just going to say, with the fuel, is that something that you buy in bulk and just keep an eye on the levels of throughout the year, or is it annually, is it every couple of months you have to top it up?
Yeah, so we generally order every week or two, depending on how much usage it's getting, and we are responsible for the government's contract, so a couple of other people will dip into that, like Public Estates and Housing dip into it for heating oil and gas oil, and harbours will dip into it for some of the red diesel that's out at the harbours that some of the boats use. But yeah, generally Fleet are responsible for the government's procurement of fuel.
Whilst Fleet Services looks after the upkeep of various vehicles across government, it also oversees other areas you may not expect. We've already heard about the army of gritters deployed in the winter months, but what about in the summer, when the main feature on the island is the roar of motorbikes over the mountain?
Darryl Humphrey, I'm the Fleet Workshop Manager at Ellerslie.
So you were just saying about TT, so what's the situation then? How does it link into the operation here?
Well, we get notified months in advance, I think it was 4 months on this occasion, what the relevant departments, mainly highways, what they're going to want and need, which assets for the TT week and the preceding week. So our job here is to prep that to what they want, their standards. So things like the vehicles that are on the course will be tracked so the control centre can see where they are at any given time. We changed the sweeper brushes to a softer nylon brush, so we're not leaving steel shards on the track, and things like that really. It's not a lot of work, but it has to be done because obviously people get nervous as you get close to TT.
So like swapping those brushes, it's like normally throughout the rest of the year we use the sort of steel ones, but yes, you have to have that thought process of forward planning for the fact that we're going to have bikes flying around the island.
That, and you don't want steel shards going into bike tyres obviously at silly speeds, so yeah. Try and avoid that if we can.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.